Hi, I'm here today with Susan Courtney, who is Executive Vice President of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska, Executive Vice President of Operations.
That's correct.
Okay. And Susan, you have won awards for your leadership. And can you tell me a little bit about we were just talking about the Innovation Award?
Yeah, it was an Innovation Elite 8 for insurance, and it was for the way we used Agile to run our business, how we transformed our business using Agile principles, which is most known for use in technology projects. So we've kind of applied it to our whole operation here, our whole enterprise.
So Susan has a wonderful example of a transformation effort here at Blue Cross Blue Shield. And why don't you go ahead? I'm going to let you just go ahead and start telling the story.
Okay. Yeah, so there's kind of two paths that go together in concert. We were on the cusp of migrating our core business, so all of our book of business as an insurance company, from one technology system to another. And that's a huge undertaking. In fact, it was going to be a 4-year-long project, 4.5-year-long project. And at the same time, we discovered Agile. And so the two kind of ran in parallel throughout that 4.5-year period. And so we underwent a lot of change, not only technology change, role changes, things like that, but also this methodology change, which actually caused a significant culture change.
So you knew that there needed to be a system change in the organization, and at the same time you had come in contact with a methodology, and the methodology Agile isn't a change management
it's not.
model,
No.
but it ended up serving as a vehicle for that to happen.
It did, yeah. So, and I would say that we really didn't have a change methodology that we used during our transformation. Probably in hindsight, that would have been a good idea. But so what happened that brought Agile, as you said, the system migration needed to happen. Early on in that migration, there was a project that was just off the rails. It was not going well. It was on a trajectory for failure. And I happened to be out in the community at an event, just getting professional development for myself. I had been curious about Agile. This was a lot of years ago, so Agile wasn't quite as well known. I had been curious about Agile, and so I went to this event, but I was honestly mostly consumed thinking about this project that was on a trajectory to failure. And but as I was listening to the speaker, he was talking about a lot of the problems that I was contemplating in this project that was failing. And he was talking about how Agile helped with that. So I started to pay more and more attention to the speaker, and by the end of it, I was so intrigued that I went up and talked to him and the folks that were putting on the seminar, and asked, do you think? I told them a little about our story, and do you think this would work for us? And they said, well, might as well give it a try. And so they came in and we talked with the business partners, and we all, I think, more than, I can't really take credit that we were brilliant, it was more desperation. They came in and helped us start using Agile techniques to get this project out of the ditch, and it actually finished on time and on budget, which is truly a miracle after where it was. So when we started to see some of that magic happen, it really got me curious about what else could Agile do. So Agile sort of went along this parallel path with the migration. We used these techniques to learn throughout the migration, which was really, really helpful for that migration being successful. So I think it ran up against resistance quite a few times during the 4 years, especially early on, because it causes a lot of role changes. People, for instance, project management in the old world is very much a taskmaster kind of position. In the new world, it's Scrum Master, which is much more looking out for team health and are we functioning in a healthy way, talking to each other about any problems, raising impediments if we're running into anything that's blocking our work, stuff like that, instead of the, you should get this done by Friday, why haven't you got this done, instead of that. So that's a pretty big shift in personality traits. A product owner role is another really important role, and that's the one that casts the vision for what needs to happen, right? So if a team needs to build something or make something happen, that product owner helps the team understand the why behind it, right? So the fuel to make that team run is, they get that, they understand at the end of this vision casting that what it's going to do for the customer. So they're energized then, right? So those are some of the key roles that emerge, but not everybody likes change. A lot of people don't like change. So, we've had some trials and tribulations going through that.
So, you cast a vision for this. Were you the product owner then? Was that your
I
role?
didn't call myself a product owner. In fact, I'm not even sure if I really understood what a product owner was, but I knew we needed, so at the time I was leading the IS department, I was the CIO. And I knew that our IT department was not delivering the value that it needed to. We wanted to, but we were really struggling. Communication was a huge struggle, understanding what the business needed, things like that. And so I talked to my department about, there's just, the world we're entering is not going to have any tolerance for waste at all. They need their products, they need their solutions, and they need them now. And so tolerating the waste and the lack of communication and the not delivering what the person wanted, that's just not going to have any room in the future world. And the people that are going to have the competitive advantage are going to be the ones that can do that. So they understood that, which was great, and helped them have the energy to go on this really difficult journey. One of the things that we used to do is a structural thing where we would put skill sets together. So we would put all the web developers on one team and all the analysts on one team and things like that, all the people that had the like skill sets. Well, at the end of the day, a group of web developers can't develop anything without the other pieces. So we had to take a piece from many teams and form a different kind of team, which caused a whole lot of other issues because people weren't used to that. They weren't used to working with this new group. And then we co-located them. So they were not sitting in the same place, they were sitting with this new kind of team. So lots and lots of change during that time period.
So moving from a traditional kind of siloed approach to getting your work done to a cross-functional team
yep.
co-located
Yep.
in the same workspace. So
Yep.
that's a lot of change.
Yeah, might not even be sitting in the IS department anymore. Might, if they're working on a lot of finance projects, might be sitting with the finance folks, which is kind of a foreign land for an IT person or whatever, HR or wherever.
Sure.
So, yeah, so that was, but on the flip side, they started to see the value in it because they were right there with their customers. So if they had a question of, do you want that button here or here, they could say, oh yeah, it needs to go here because when I'm doing this, it's so much easier if it's here. Or do you want it to do this or that? And they could please their customer in a much more immediate fashion, and then their customer was kind of rooting for them. So it's kind of this synergy that grew out of it. Whereas before, because it was sort of a black box, people would think, gosh, I gave that project to IT 6 months ago and I haven't seen anything. The perception is they weren't even working on it. Well, they were, but they, weren't very aligned.
It's like going to the bank drive-through and putting your money in the
book.
that
Yeah.
little thing that gets sucked into some vacuum
Yeah,
and disappears.
it seems
and
like
you're
it's
waiting
just
to hear
gone.
hello.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a nice slide that you have here because it talks about the relationship between having competent process skills and the people skills, which are often called soft skills and often not considered a priority for getting a job done. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Right. So I think, so the harder skills, the engineering practices, the Agile and Scrum rules part, the requirements, those things are more that hard set. Or if you think about it in relation to other departments, like in finance, there's the gap rules or whatever. The rule set kind of part of things, or compliance. That's important. Clearly, it's important. You have to have that. But we do, and especially, I think we found ourselves had overweighted the importance of that and underweighted the importance of the ability to collaborate, the ability to facilitate a meeting effectively, leadership should not be command and control. It should be servant leadership, meaning you pull out the best in all and help harness that towards that vision. It's a completely different style, though, than we had been socialized to as you grew up. I mean, you even think about our classrooms, right, where our kids go to school. You've got the teacher, the authority figure, and all the kids who just follow the rules. And that's changing now, but when I went to school, that's how it was, so we were socialized that way. That's changing a lot now. You see a lot more group projects, a lot more kind of self-managed teams, experimentation, that sort of thing.
Starting sooner. But the educational system has traditionally trained us that your goal is to find the one right answer and to have the most of the one right answer, because then you would get the highest grade on,
Right.
on a curve. And so
Right.
learning to collaborate and share is, particularly in technical fields, finance or accounting or IT, where knowledge is power.
Right.
Those are skills, these soft skills are skills that are not naturally taught within the educational
Right.
hierarchy.
Right. But very important. So,
I want you to back up, take a
Okay.
look at that. So the vision, you talked about the vision. Why don't you go ahead and read the vision?
So we talked. We came up with this vision. It was actually an excruciating process. It took several days, full days, and it's not that many words. So you're going to wonder why it took that long. But it reads: We, the IS department, are passionate about serving our customers, the trusted partner who delivers high quality, effective solutions, positive, collaborative, committed, engaged, and fun. And when we wrote it, I remember thinking, "There's no way." We will never be thought of that way. We definitely weren't being thought of that way then, but I would say that we did achieve that, and still today, if you were to ask the customers of the IS department, they would say, yeah, that's them.
So, and this is 7 years out, right?
Yeah.
So that's 7 years out.
Roughly.
So, some leaders believe that it's the executive's job to develop the vision and to craft the vision. In fact, there was a former iteration of a vision, I think, that you had shaped to say, here's where we're going. And then others believe in crafting a shared vision, which it sounds like this was. Can you speak to those two, and if you have a preference, or is there a place for one versus the other?
I think it has to be shared, at least at some level. I mean, I think the executives do have more insight into things that the rest of the organization may not, but in order to have buy-in and understanding, you have to have that dialogue about why. Why would it be this and not this, or what? And that's what took the several days, right? That's what took all the time, is all that dialogue. But not only do you come out with a good vision, you come out with so much more mutual understanding of the whole.
And
so,
commitment.
Exactly. Commitment to the vision and understanding, it's hugely powerful. It's a great investment of time. It didn't feel like it at the time. But
And I have seen, I'm a believer in a shared vision as well, and I've seen teams come together with members of the executive team down to folks sweeping the floor.
Yep.
And they all have a shared understanding of the DNA of the organization.
Yep.
And lifted out of that come these kind of universal priorities of what that ideal future looks like. And that
Exactly.
looks like that's what you have come up with here.
Exactly.
Okay.
So one of the things that we believe deeply in is transparency. And we use, you'll see, if you walk around, you'll see a lot of Kanban walls, is what they're called, but it's basically stuff that you want to do, stuff that you're working on now, and stuff that got done. But it's a place where we have conversations about what might be preventing things from getting done, or what I might need from you in order to get something done. And we have it in priority order, so we all agree what the most important and least important is. And that happens at our more granular team level, but it also happens at the top of the organization when we talk about major projects.
So a Kanban, Kanban, is a methodology or a tool to
manage work, really. I would say to manage work, how work gets done. And it's under the Agile umbrella, and if anybody's familiar with Lean, they share a lot of DNA. Agile and Lean are kindred spirits. Lean is more about optimizing a process. Agile and its subparts like Scrum and Kanban are more about how you get work done. So they're different, but they have a lot of similar DNA.
And they're similar also in that they're extraordinarily visual.
Very
processes.
visual.
And so the slide that we're looking at here is a sample of a Kanban board. And Susan, you have some more here, I think.
Right. In that, like our metrics, there's burn up and burn down charts that measure how the work is getting done. Is it getting done as we thought it would? And it's kind of stock market, curve kind of stuff. It doesn't go in linear line like we have it charted out, but you measure it against that expected line, and as long as the deviations aren't too far, it's not alarming. If it gets too far, that's when you know, hey, something's going on here that we need to investigate.
And the one that we're looking at here, normally you're going to think I'm successful as the line increases, and this is the opposite, and explain what's happening at the front end of the line as compared to what's happening at the bottom. What does that represent?
So the burn down chart is the one we use the most, actually, and the let's see, I have to think here. Y-axis, the vertical axis, is the amount of work you have, the amount of units of work that need to be done, and then time is the bottom axis, the x-axis, the horizontal one. And then, so it should kind of march down as you go, and of course, again, not exactly, but if your line should be closer to the trend line and it seems to be drifting up, that means you're not working at the pace you should. You may have to pull something out of that release, meaning you're not going to get it done. You might need to add people, but it's an indicator that something's off kilter.
Okay.
We have a few things that are, I think, really important with Agile. One of them is called a retrospective, and it's sort of where we inspect and adapt. And one of the things in this migration that I talked about, we're migrating all of our business from one system to another. That was a 4-year project. In the 3rd year, we were at the razor's edge of failure. We were sending out temporary ID cards, which is as close as it gets to all-out failure. And so after that, we thought, you know what, we need to have a retrospective on this year. What happened? Why did it go so poorly? And out of that was born this slide with all the little bitty 3M sticky notes. I should have bought stock in 3M. There was this wall that you see in the slide, as well as an opposite wall just as full, and those are all the activities that needed to happen to migrate all the lines of business in that 4th year. And that was born out of that retrospective session that we had. We said, what if, because we were having trouble with the handoffs between departments, what if twice a week we gathered the people that lead these areas and have a conversation about what's going wrong? What do we need? Do you need something from me? Oh, this is in the way. Hey, we need an answer from that broker. Any of those things, we can talk about that twice a week. The end result of that, the following year, when we were almost going to fail the year before, was the smoothest migration event we had had to date. And it was 3 times as much volume as we had done before.
Wow.
And it was our marquee customers, the ones you really want to be careful to have a bad event. So, and we had our smoothest renewal season that we had ever had. So the it's just sort of, permeated the organization, that increased communication.
And so as I'm looking at this wall, I mean, that's just a behemoth amount of work. And it looks like there's some structure to this. Was this just helpful for the people who were doing the work to understand this, or did this help paint a picture for others in the organization?
Yeah, it was almost like a universal language. So we actually brought our board of directors. So we had been talking to the board of directors about the migration and how complex it was, and oh my goodness, it was just words, right? So you couldn't really get it across because it's just words. We walked into this room, they looked at the walls, and their jaws literally dropped. It was crazy how much easier it was to understand when you had a picture of it as opposed to just words. We have another slide that shows how we interpreted healthcare reform. Healthcare reform is extremely complex. You've probably seen it's over my head if you stack up all the regulations, the paper regulations. So we broke those into the really major regulations and tied them to our areas of work, and then what teams they would impact. And the dependencies, which is all the yarn, were quickly, it helped us understand why we felt the way we did, which was overwhelmed. But it also helped you understand, okay, if I'm going to be working on this, here's the teams I need to draw into that conversation so that you weren't off doing something that was going to hurt another team.
So the row of yellow, if I'm not mistaken, there was an employee that needed to figure this out, right?
Yep.
And so, and the employee said, hang on.
Yep, she said, I have something in my head. I know I think I have an idea, I gotta go to Walmart, because Walmart's right up the street. And she came back, she had gotten some yarn, and she constructed this wall. And she, through that, got out of her head this, and the conversations, and actually the governor came and looked at this, and we were able to have a discussion about here's how the law is going to impact us and why it's such a...
So the yellow side is...
That's the law broken into the parts.
So these are the regulations broken into parts, and then what's in the middle?
That's the areas of our business, basically. It's the highest level segments of our business that we would divide work into.
Okay, and then on the far right is...
Those are teams. They could be technology teams, they could be departmental teams, a lot of cross-functional teams, just different people that have to work on...
We'd have to work on that and have to touch it.
Yep.
And so, so someone has a great idea, hey, I'm going to go get some yarn, and comes back. And what happened as a result of kind of mapping this web out?
Well, we had a much better understanding and a more global view of what was affected, right? So that when you go in for the more micro work efforts, you understood that big picture much better. And so the dialogue and the solutions were so much more powerful.
And I would think that it both made it look more complex and more simple at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little crazy. So after the big Kanban wall with all little bitty sticky notes, the executives went off on their strategy retreat for that year, and one of the things they talked about is that was almost magical what happened. We need to make sure we harness that and don't let it die with the migration. Since the migration's over, we want this to live on because it caused so much good. So they came back and said, how would we apply this to our whole organization, and how we do strategy, how we govern, how we do everything, and how we get everybody on board, from the CEO to the person sweeping the floor, help them understand. So through that, the room that had the sticky notes, actually, we repurposed that, and it had a mission of bringing clarity, focus, help us to execute, and then keep culture at the center. The healthy culture that we had developed, we wanted to continue to further that. So we use that room today, actually, to govern our business. And when we do strategy discussions, we do them in that room, so everything is front and center on the walls. It's really powerful. So we continue to kind of use those techniques. One of the things that we talk about for leaders going through something like this is you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, which is not a really comfortable place to live, I don't think, for anybody, but you get used to it, right? So we talk about this example of the headlights of a car when you're driving at night. You can see what's right in front of you, but it gets a little foggier as you go further out, and really foggy or not at all, as you get really far out. And we've trained people to think about what we want to get done that way. There can be some stuff we really want to get done, but that could change, especially in our environment. In anybody's environment, things change so quickly that you have to be able to embrace change, and that's one of the things that I love about Agile, is I like to say it embraces reality. The reality is it's going to change. Whether you want to resist it or not is up to you, but it's going to change. So it's just how the world works.
One of the texts that we've been reading creates a map for planning change, and it does it in a nice logical 9-step order, and there's this sense that you can kind of map out and plan out what's going to happen when, and what would Agile say to that?
So Agile would think that's an illusion.
Okay.
It's a comfortable place to believe, but it just isn't reality. So, and I know it's very frustrating, I get that, but it's funny how once you get used to embracing reality and only committing to, so the way Agile works is you commit to 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks worth of work, depending on the organization. I think our sprints are 3 weeks here. So you commit to 3 weeks of work. The stuff that you're going to pull in next to work on for that next 3 weeks, that can be reordered all the way up until it gets pulled in. So if something changes in the environment or externally, or a customer comes in with or a sales guy says, hey, I can sell this, you can change that order and embrace reality. Whereas if you have a 6-year plan, where do you fit that in? You try to jam it in somewhere, but then it doesn't have good results.
Several years ago, I was doing some work with Pepsi in Chicago, and their marketing folks, and they were frustrated because strategic plans were being rolled out, and things changed after a quarter. And it would seem that today the norm is kind of the most you can really clearly map out is a quarter,
Yeah.
and then be prepared to adapt.
Yep.
At that point. So it seems like Agile really
Embraces that. Yep.
Although I have a question, because I'm thinking about our architecture business, and that there is a date when the owner is expecting that the drawings are complete and they're ready to go to bid, because that's going to affect when we can put steel in the ground, because that has to happen before it freezes. So all of these things have to happen by a certain date. And I get I'm thinking it might be a misperception though, that these deadlines can become fluid, and that the Agile process might reveal you really can't make that deadline, or it might. I guess my question really is, how do you make those deadlines in the Agile process?
So it's actually interesting for me to think about it in an architecture business, because it's a different kind of process.
But if you had to roll out a software plan, say you have to roll out new software before enrollment starts in October.
Yep.
You've got a hard deadline.
So with software, there's something called minimum viable product that you have to decide what is the bare bones minimum. So when I go buy a car, I like the fully loaded car, because I drive my cars for a really long time, right? So I like a fully loaded car, but you know what, I don't need that. I can get to work and back with a bare bones, just one that has an engine and wheels and is safe. I can get back and forth to work. That's minimum viable product. All I got to do is get back and forth to work, but we like to think about, but while I've got you, I want to get all this other stuff done. But is there a way to slice up the work so that you could get this done, but then add on other features as you have time?
Got it.
Because then you can have the value of that bare bones product, and people can use it. You get feedback, so you may want to even tweak that, because you might not have hit the market exactly where you meant to. But then you can also continue to add value, so you maximize the value to the customer instead of them having to wait until it's all done, and you have all the bells and whistles. And by the way, they maybe didn't even want those bells and whistles. So
that's interesting, because the risk then, and one of the things that Agile lets you weigh as a customer is what are the pros and cons in each of these phases. The potential con of say delivering a partial set of drawings that someone's going to bid on is that the bid isn't going to be accurate.
Right.
And it could actually, once we finish the drawings, cost more.
Right.
Which is an owner can make that decision. Do they
exactly,
care or not?
and that's the thing, is you have to. It's really a full empowerment of the customer, but they have to be ready for that empowerment, right? They have to understand you can't have one foot in both worlds.
Yeah.
You can't have the cost not go up if you make changes and that cause the bid to be different.
And that almost is always what happens.
Yeah.
So that's it. So it's interesting playing with it. So okay. So part of Agile then lets you make decisions about how much of what is being designed or built or whatever that is, do you need when? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So expect to lose some good people.
Yeah, so one of the things, because it is such a shift in mindset, both at a role level, you might be in a completely different role, or your role might act differently than it did, and also just the interactions that you're used to shooting emails to each other, but now you got to talk to each other, and there's all kinds of other changes. There are some people that just don't like working in that environment, and they're good people. There's nothing wrong with those folks, but they may not fit in that environment any longer, so they may leave, and you have to be comfortable that, one of my favorite quotes is that you can't steal second without taking your foot off of first. There are times when you just have to decide if it's worth it to you to go to this new place. You're going to have to change. You're going to have to let go of some things, and sometimes it's people. And again, it doesn't make them bad. It's just not their comfort zone, and that's okay.
We had a plant that I was working with, and transformed how they processed. It was called the Battle of the Bulge. They were going to have a 300% increase of stuff coming in, and their favorite line supervisor, big tall guy, big booming, my guys, they all stood with their feet about 2-3 feet apart, just a great guy. Finally, after we went through the process and clarified the values and how we were going to operate as an organization, he just couldn't get it. And there were these hard conversations, and then finally he just accepted, I can't do this. And we celebrated his having served the organization and moving on. So there's a way that you can help people make those decisions without it being hard. But then sometimes it is hard that their stars aren't getting on board and they don't, but they want to stay. Have you had any of those examples?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It can be really hard, and I think that it might get easier over time because I think with the newer generations they're way more used to change. The world that my father worked in, he worked at the same company for 37 years. And so there's still enough of that I expect to stay at whatever company till I retire. It's just kind of our mindset, those of us that are baby boomers. And so that can be hard. And obviously we like to work with people as much as possible, but if you're in an environment that just doesn't fit you, you're never going to be happy, you're never going to be able to produce. So we try to make that as gentle as possible to help them to do some, get to the place where they do feel comfortable.
And they can make that decision.
Yeah, exactly. So we also have kind of a tendency to grab onto what I call silver bullet mentality. So thinking, oh, that's the answer, and thinking that's the whole answer. And usually it's a little piece of the answer maybe, or maybe not even that. And you really have to fully explore, is that what we have more to learn about this. So there's a technique in Agile called spiking that is when we don't even know enough about the problem. We got to kind of start trying in order to even learn about what it is, which kind of flies in the face of the silver bullet mentality, and it's how we're trained, right? There's an answer, and if I get to that answer, the right answer first, then I win, right? And sometimes that's an illusion also, right? That you actually get to a much better answer if you chew on it a little bit and play with it a little bit and find out you're not really solving the problem you thought you were unless you go this direction. So.
And I would think, if we think about Agile and its collaborative orientation, that innate in the process is, if it's your answer, it isn't the right answer. You must bring others in, which helps prevent this silver bullet if you don't get into groupthink.
Exactly, yeah. So you gotta oscillate away from groupthink and away from command and control and settle somewhere in the middle where you're really harvesting the meat of those great ideas. I think there's also a tendency when you're going through change to feel very overwhelmed because, and it's real. Actually, my boss during the migration said it's kind of like pushing, if you think about a domino standing up the tall way, it's kind of like trying to push it from one end of the table to the other. To get it to the other end, you have to push it. You can't not push it, right? But if you push it too hard, it falls down. So it's finding that just the right speed to keep it moving. And I've definitely pushed a little too hard at times and invoked the organizational immune system. And sometimes probably not.
What do you mean by invoked the organizational immune system?
So that's one of our things that we like to talk about here too, is if you go too hard at change, push people, not just in the stretch, but in the where you're breaking them kind of, they'll lash back, right? There'll be lashback from the organization of some sort, and who knows what form it will take. But if you've pushed too hard, so you have to be tuned into that and make sure you're not going too fast, but you also got to purposefully move along. So it's a balancing act.
Well, I would think that there's an art to being able to tell what's the difference between resistance, which is going to happen, and what is invoking the organizational immune system, which is actually saying, I'm as a leader pushing too far. So how do you figure that out?
So I think, and this was a big learning for me, because in the early days, I would say, well, they just don't like change. They're just being obstinate. I would, I'd kind of make them the bad guy. That's not appropriate. And when I slowly moved over to being genuinely curious, and the thing is if you can see the purpose of the change, it's clear. But if that person doesn't see the purpose well, if they haven't fully embraced the purpose, it makes no sense to go to there. So of course they're going to resist, right? So I have to spend the time. It's a great investment of my time to say, help me understand. I genuinely do want to understand. What is it that's keeping you from wanting to go there? And then as you talk, then I'm like, oh, those are the pieces of the puzzle I left out. No wonder. And occasionally you run into people that just are going to dig in their feet no matter what, and those are the folks that probably just are so uncomfortable with change that it's not the right ride for them, but they're pretty rare. Generally, it's more the failure of the leader to give enough data points for people to make sense of the change. If they fully understand it, a lot of times they'll outrun you to the solution.
Okay.
Ambiguity is another thing that's really uncomfortable with us as we go through change, right? So that's something that we had to learn to deal with, and I think we're still learning to deal with it. And actually right now, we're in the healthcare reform 2.0 maybe, who knows? And so it's kind of that daily watching the tweets come through to see if we're going to have to make a bunch of changes. And so it's real and it's there, but it's really just becoming comfortable with that and staying tuned into when is there actually something I need to react to, as opposed to getting too caught up in the drama.
So I'm curious because, there was some time invested in healthcare 1.0. We know there's 2.0, who knows what happens. And some people are wired in a way that there's this great sense of personal fulfillment when they can check something off.
Yes.
So say it's a 3-week plan or it's a 3-month plan. It's a plan nonetheless, and I want to meet that goal. I want to say, well done at the end. I want to check it off. And it feels like it's a waste of my time and effort. Now it changes again. How would you speak to that, given the reality of our world now?
Well, I've come to believe that almost nothing is actually ever done, and that these instances are just opportunities for great learning that may have a lifespan. They may, and maybe it helps that I grew up in IT, because IT solutions, become obsolete pretty quickly. So maybe I've become more comfortable with this concept than others, but you learn from each thing that you do. Healthcare Reform 1.0, man, it's like a master's degree. So 2.0, we will apply some of those learnings. But we'll learn more. And will it be the permanent solution? No, probably. I mean, I'd be surprised, right? Because there's always more things that need to be improved on. So I think if you can get comfortable that it just is, most things are not done. They're just not done. When are you done growing, right? When are you done developing? You're never done.
I like to use the term think of a deliverable perhaps as a comma instead of a period.
That's excellent, yeah.
And being comfortable with run-on sentences in your life. And some of us are wired naturally to liken periods and then moving on to the next sentence, when in fact life now, with the amount of change that we're having and the kinds of change that we're having, that really life is a series of commas where something gets taken to the next level.
It is. That's an excellent way to look at it. And then one of the other things we talk a lot about transparency, and it's not transparency like everybody knows every detail of everything. That's not transparency. To us is equipping people with as much information that helps inform a decision, right? So, and we say it builds confidence, alignment, and trust. And a lot of our transparency is on Kanban boards, or teams have what they call team norms, and they usually post them in their area, and it's the agreement of how we're going to interact. We're going to have work hours from 9 to 4. If you want to work from 7 to 4 or 9 to 5, you can do, or whatever. You're going to have some core hours, because that way we can interact with each other, but it gives flexibility. And it might be, we post our vacations at least a week in advance so we can plan. Different things like that. If I have an issue, I'm going to raise it at the first possible opportunity rather than hold on to it. Things like that. Those efforts towards transparency, where we post things on walls, really, it's actually surprising to me how effective it is, because it seems so simple. But it really helps to have a place for you and I to have a conversation and point kind of to the map, and say, well, but what about this? And it just makes a difference and helps breed that trust and gets us out of that black box. You talked about the putting the money in and off it goes. And
transparency, that word, I think about it as being an interpersonal skill.
mm-hmm.
I'm interpersonally transparent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you're saying, I mean, that's a piece of it,
Mm-hmm.
but it really is about the data being out there,
Yep.
the information being transparent so that anyone can
Mm-hmm.
access that, which facilitates our being transparent with one
Mm-hmm.
another and
Mm-hmm.
talking about it.
Right, and I think it's both. I
Mhm.
actually think, organizations are just, lots of people.
Mhm.
And so if we're interpersonally transparent with each other, it breeds that same phenomena that you get at the company level if people are transparent about their work and things like that. So it's same principle. So one of the things that I love most about Agile is it embraces reality. It doesn't pretend that you can map something out. And it's also, while people will call it a methodology, and I sometimes even do, it's actually, that's the least important part of it. That's like 1% of it. The 99% of it is a mindset and a way of thinking. And it's really oriented around how do we bring value? How do we together bring value to our customer? And really orients everything that way. And it uses tools like transparency and stand-ups and retros and demos and things like that to do that. But that's really what the umbrella is how do we add value to the world? How do we bring more value?
So the Kanban is a visual wall, a board of what would look like Post-it notes,
Mhm.
listing what needs to be done and who's going to be doing it. A retro is like an after-action review. What happened?
Basically, yeah. So you talk about what went well, what didn't go as well, and out of those things that didn't go so well, what are 1 or 2 or maybe 3 that we really want to commit to doing better in the next sprint or the next quarter or the
So it
next
doesn't
whatever.
just happen at the end, it happens
Right.
throughout the process.
And that's the power over the old style, lessons learned at the very end of the project 6 months or a year later, is you actually get to try it. Can we do this better? Can we do whatever that thing was that we didn't do so well last sprint? Can we do it better? So you start to, again, minimum viable product and build on. It's that same principle.
And then stand-ups.
Stand-ups are when you get 15 minutes and you get around your Kanban wall or your project wall and you talk about what did you do yesterday, what are you going to do today, and do you need help with anything? So if I need you to do something, that would be my opportunity. Now, of course, I can talk to you outside of stand-up too, but at least once a day, we for sure are going to be together, and I can say, hey, Janine, I need this because I got to get this task done. Oh, sure, okay, I'll make sure that. Or no, I can't. Oh, I can help with that. So it gives you that ability to, as a group, solve for whatever the priority is.
And then there's pigs and chickens for these meetings. So what's the difference between a pig and a chicken?
So there's a cartoon, and I wish I had it. Maybe I can find it and show it to you. But so there's a cartoon where the pig and the chicken are going to breakfast, and the pig is, his life's on the line because he's the bacon, so he doesn't get to live through this experience. The chicken is simply laying an egg, so not fully invested, right? Neck's not on the line. So in Agile, we use those terms. So I'm usually a chicken because I'm not on the team a lot of times, but I'll go observe stand-ups or whatever. But that means I can't talk because my neck's not on the line for that commitment. But the people on the team, they're the pigs. They get to commit, so therefore they get to talk about how it gets done and what they commit to. So it's an interesting concept of understanding your roles.
So one of the challenges as one grows as a leader is having an idea of what the solution is, and it feels like it's so much more efficient just to share it and do it. And the chicken and the pig concept is really saying, no, that's not what's going to happen. So can you talk about how you...
So first of all, I would say that it's a little bit of arrogance, right? That we think we always have the better answer. Sometimes there might be truth to it, and you can always, as a chicken, after the meeting say, hey, have you thought about this? But, the team's going to come up with a a better answer because they're working together and they understand the commitment better than any outsider would. And that's why you see problems with a lot of things, a lot of pet projects and things like that you see problems with, because the person that's asking it, the person with that great idea, doesn't fully understand the impact. Whereas the pigs, they do. They're under the covers, they understand what's going on down there, how hard it might be or what it might cause, ripple effects it might cause. So I think it helps to separate that. And
it fully delegates the decision. It would appear.
Yeah,
yes.
and I'm not a big fan of the word delegate.
Okay, what word would you use?
I like empower.
Empower.
And I know it's a buzzword, and I know people get tired of it, but it's
to empower is to take your power and give it to another or an entity. And,
right.
Yeah.
And you have to invest in that entity, right? You have to have grown these folks so that and give them all the information that you have. You can't hold back some information and then, well, why didn't they come to the right conclusion? Well, you didn't tell them half the stuff. So empowerment is not a throw it over the wall event.
Abdication.
Yes. Empowerment is truly raising them up so they are equipped to solve this problem. And not only do you come up with better solutions, but you've expanded your bandwidth exponentially, right?
So the chicken, you have the opportunity to coach,
Yep.
they provide information.
Yep.
Hey, I'd like you to think about this, I'd like
Yep.
you to think about, but it doesn't happen when the team is doing its work
Right.
in the stand-up.
Right.
Another part of the Agile methodology that really creates a place for collaboration to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, and I think those are the major tenets, I guess, of Agile. We had plenty of bumps and bruises, and the thing is, though, so we talk about failure is tuition, and the concept is, you write a tuition check for your college course, it's spent. Whether you go to class or not, it's spent. Whether you take notes and engage or you just go there and twiddle, it's spent no matter what. So any mistake you make, whether it's a personal mistake, a team mistake, an organizational mistake, that that check's written. What you do with that, what value you get from that, is completely up to you. So if you fully engage and I talk about wring every learning out of this that you can, because we wrote the tuition check. So it just frames you up differently to look at mistakes in a healthy way, I think. And it's kind of fun now. It used to be people would hide their mistakes back before we started talking about it this way. And it took a little while for the trust to evolve. But now they fully see the value. You see everybody talking about it that way. It's really, really powerful.
They say in the Silicon Valley that you wear your mistakes on your sleeve as a badge of honor, that it's the fact that you failed that's what helps you learn.
Exactly.
Which is,
it's just anti what we've been taught, right? It's back to I want to get to the right answer first. You miss a lot of learnings.
So one of the questions that I'm regularly asked afterwards is, I wish the speaker had talked a little bit about how they've encountered resistance and overcome resistance in a process. Can you think about in that first project that you talked about, and there's kind of a pre really leaning into Agile and then the post leaning into Agile. Can you think about a specific example of encountering resistance and how you all worked through it?
Yeah, I think one of the early examples, and this is back in the days when the people in IS and the business people really, frankly didn't like each other very much and didn't trust each other at all. And I think one of the earliest resistance events was, the team having to work through how they were going to solve some code that they needed to, and it was some knockdown, drag out kind of discussions, but and we had help from facilitators. We worked through that and got to that. So it modeled for us that genuine curiosity of, why don't you like my idea? Why? Really help me understand. And they saw the magic of, we actually came to a better solution because we talked it through. So there's that underlying respect that I think when you have distance between people or you have resistance to change, there's a gap of giving them the benefit of the doubt. There's just this natural human tendency to think, well, there's something wrong with them because they don't like change or because they're resisting change. And I really think the most powerful thing, and we saw it over and over, was to really dig into that and genuinely try to crack open, but why not? Help me understand. Because what it does, they a lot of times have valid concerns that you haven't talked about. And if you haven't talked about, or even maybe sometimes haven't thought about, then it gives you the opportunity to, wow, that's a great idea, I didn't even think about that. And either beef up your communication plan, or beef up the process that you were going to use, or include other people, or whatever whatever the resistance was about. That's, I think, what we found over and over to be and sometimes there were occasions when people were just very uncomfortable. The manager position changes quite a bit with a transition to Agile, and there were managers that just really liked command and control, and that it just wasn't their comfort zone. So there's sometimes when it's not going to work out long term. Yeah.
So there's a tool called the 5 Whys, which is, I think, what you're kind of saying in dealing with resistance,
yes.
which takes a lot of maturity on my part, because you may not be behaving
I might
maturely.
You might be really frustrated with me.
Yeah. And so okay, help me understand then why you disagree. And then, so that's your first why. And then it's followed with, well, why is that important? Well, why is that important? Or why is that important? And, well, why is that important? Which really can then get down to these root causes. And you're saying keep asking.
Keep asking the whys.
Why, and manage your internal temperament so that you're not demonstrating the same threat that the other is demonstrating.
Because that frustration will bleed through, right? And you'll be in kind of this death
spiral. It heats up the container and you
yes.
just get into an argument.
Exactly. The other thing, it's kind of a silly trick that I use, is if I've got some frustration built up with somebody, I think about, what if somebody that I really trust and respect said the same thing this person is saying? How would I receive that? And it's interesting how much it changes, because the content isn't what my reactions to a lot of times.
It's the delivery.
It's the delivery, it's the baggage I have, it's whatever.
So what you're saying is, I mean, sometimes we think about, well, how do I persuade that person to change their mind?
Yep.
And your first question is, how can I listen differently?
Yes.
So that I can hear what they're saying. And what do you have control over?
Yep.
How you listen.
Right. Right.
And so that's
and you go
profound.
into almost being a detective, and that becomes the game. I got to figure out, what is it? I wonder what it is.
There's a gem in there somewhere. I got to find that.
And a lot of times
regardless
there
of
is.
the delivery mechanism.
Yep.
Interesting. So we're going to wrap up here in just a second, but I thought I would ask you. I've got a handout here of Patrick's 9 steps, which again I mentioned to you. You know, they feel sequential, and they're coming from the Agile framework, where you're speaking to professionals at a variety of levels in organizations all over the country, all kinds of disciplines, from CIOs to folks that have finished their undergraduate, and this is their first master's level course. When you look at this map that Patrick provides us, which is a WISE map, and it's built on Cotter's work, which has been around forever and is proven, given your experience of reality now, how would you speak into this, or what guidance would you give?
So I think the elements, the 9 elements of it are profound. I mean, there's really good, there's value in all of them. I think if the expectation is that it's truly that linear, do 1 and then do 2 and then do 3, I just haven't experienced that. For me, it's a much more iterative kind of approach, where I might do some of one and then I might have to do some of another, and then, back and forth. So I would see it more as kind of a framework where you draw from it what you need at a given time, but you have to measure it against what you're using it on. The prescription format of 1, 2, 3, 4 hasn't worked for me. Not to say it wouldn't, but
so keep it in mind.
Yeah.
And then know that there's a need to flex. I guess that's the art.
Yes.
That's the art of managing change.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to learn more about Agile and kind of tinker around in it, is there any resource that you might recommend?
So I would. There's Agile Alliance is a really good group that you can subscribe to their newsletter and that sort of thing. And then just Google Agile and there's all kinds of stuff, or YouTube it and see what videos you can get, because there's some good stuff out there. And there's Agile conferences and all that. They tend to be a little more technology centric, but there's a lot of information out there.
And something that you said was, it sounds like if you're going to do Agile as an organization, do the whole thing. Is that right?
I would say if you want to maximize the value, absolutely. Now, if I work in an organization that probably won't go fully Agile because you do need support from the top to go fully Agile, I still think there's value in doing it at any level that you can. And it's less about doing Agile than having the mindset of agility and, you know, doing as much of the servant leadership and the transparency and the collaboration, those kinds of things.
Okay. Susan, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Today. This is fantastic. And we will have there's a handout that has some of this material that you can take a look at as well. Thanks.